If you're Generation X, like I am, you'll relate to this. Last Thanksgiving, without meaning to, I came across my old man's retirement plan. It was not in a fancy cabinet or on one of those spreadsheets. Nope, nothing like that. The retirement plan came out of my dad's mouth, in what you'd call a fleeting conversation, as I was helping him fix a leaky faucet under the kitchen sink. Out of the blue, he goes, "I figure I'll just keep working till I just can't anymore." The scary part in all this? His voice was eerily as okay with that statement as if he'd just said, "Hey, the weather forecast's going to be unseasonably warm for the next few days." He said it like it didn't mean a thing, but let me tell you, hearing those words, how he pretty much planned to work till he punched his last ticket, I'm obviously not the emotional type, but yeah, fair to say, it shook me to my core. My dad is 63, and last I checked, life expectancy is 76. I mean, for God's sake, his knees are shot. His hand, the one holding the wrench, it was shaking from this thing the white coats call arthritis. And he drives a delivery truck. I didn't say anything. I wanted to, but I was speechless. So I just stood there, nodded and smiled and held the flashlight. But later that night, I pulled up my own retirement account on my phone and I stared at the number, long and hard. And I kind of felt something I can only describe as the financial equivalent of stepping on a scale after the holidays. The number's fine, but the trajectory sure as all heck is not. Deep down, you know some things have to change, or down the line, you'll be in big trouble. My dad's a boomer, but barely. He's got a small pension from a job he left in 1997. That's all fine and dandy. But what about us? Generation X, the 64.5 million Americans born between 1965 and 1980 who never got diddly squat, aka never got a pension at all. And let me tell you, my dearly beloved, what we're heading towards? Well, it makes my dad's leaky faucet look like a walk in the park. Yep. The forgotten generation is facing a huge problem, which, while we're on the topic, why are we forgotten? Let me know what your theory on this, because every article I read talks about boomers, millennials, and Gen Z. But us? Nothing. Not a peep. I guess we truly have been forgotten. Our Gen X issues didn't come out of thin air. No siree, Bob. You see, in 1983, traditional pension plans accounted for around 40% of all retirement plans in the United States. By 2022, and you might want to take a seat for that one, but that number had fallen to 6%. This shift was codified by ERISA, the good old Employee Retirement Income Security Act, which completely screwed us over. Which fundamentally changed how Americans save for retirement. And as luck would have it, Gen X landed right in the middle of that freaking collapse. Well, only 14% of Gen X workers have a traditional pension, but the boomers, as per usual, those folks are doing pretty okay. And 56% of them have pensions. Sucks to be us. I recently read an article by this lady called Deb Boyden. She's the head of U.S. Defined Contribution at Schroders. And to put it plainly, we Gen Xers entered the workforce as pensions were being phased out and replaced by defined contribution plans. Matter of fact, it was so new that key features we now consider the norm, like auto-enroll and auto-escalate, weren't common at the time. So in other words, we walked into the building after the safety net was removed, but also right before anyone thought to put up a sign. Right? Fun times. And to add insult to injury, let me remind you that the 401k was never designed to be the whole freaking pension plan. No siree, Bob. It was merely a provision enacted in 1978. A tax loophole that got repurposed into the primary retirement vehicle for an entire generation. Gen X became the first cohort to rely almost entirely on self-directed retirement savings through defined contribution plans, with no backup, no guaranteed income floor, and frankly, no instruction manual. That's all fancy talk to say we were handed a manual in a language we didn't understand and expected to figure it out by ourselves. God, were we ever taken for a ride or what? So now, what does the actual damage look like for us? Well, it kind of depends on which number you trust. And we Gen Xers don't trust nobody. Never have, never will. And that's why we never claimed any political parties either, or made one our whole freaking personality, like our Gen Z offspring have. But I digress. So yeah, none of the numbers are comforting. I've worked in financial institutions my whole life, So I know some real data that'll scare the living daylight out of you. The National Institute on Retirement Security reported in 2023 that the typical Gen X household had just $40,000 in retirement savings. $40,000. That's a Chevy Colorado or a Tacoma, a mid-range pickup truck. Fidelity Investments, looking at its 24.8 million plan participants in the fourth quarter of 2025, put the average Gen X 401k balance at $222,100. Better. Still not close. Vanguard, another major 401k provider, shows similar patterns across their participant base. Here's more stuff that'll give you the heebie-jeebies. Northwestern Mutual's 2025 Planning and Progress Study found that Gen X estimates they'll need $1.57 million to retire comfortably. That's over $300,000 more than the national average across all generations. Schroeder's 2025 U.S. Retirement Survey found Gen Xers expect to actually retire with $711,771. So, apparently, there is a gap of about $400,000 between what we need and what we expect to have. Great. Fantastic. And don't get me started on private retirement, because, big surprise, we Gen Xers have nothing there either. Zero, buddy. Z-E-R-O. And of those of us who say they have saved, well, they also confirm they feel behind, and I believe they use the term significantly so. I mean, that's more than any other generation. Long story short, only 16% of Gen X Americans feel they've saved enough. 16%. And wouldn't you know it, because it seems to be the bane of our existence as Gen X, part of the explanation is just timing. In many ways, we were born at the perfect time. We had a real childhood, with fresh air, fresh garden hose water, and full sugar cereals with real cartoons on Saturday morning. But on the flip side, retirement timing, which, let's face it, much like a kneecap replacement, is not far off? Yeah, that timing has not been working in our favor, folks. According to Fidelity's 2024 State of Retirement Planning Study, Gen Xers began saving for retirement at age 36 on average. Millennials started at 27. Gen Z started at 20. Those early years of compound growth that financial advisors talk about with the same reverence priests reserve for saints, we Gen Xers completely missed out on them. Even though these videos are about us, I gotta tell you, I do try to warn the younger generation, but goddamn, these kids won't listen. I see my barber once a week, and that 23-year-old kid still pretends he's got all the time in the world. But again, let's say it together. I digress. And check this out. A study by the Nationwide Retirement Institute in the Harris Poll found that a majority of non-retired Gen Xers don't view retirement as an urgent priority until they get to age 50 or later. And I can see that. Because while I'm a younger Gen X, 1977 reporting for duty, the concept of aging is still pretty foreign to us. I mean, I still feel 27 in my head. Am I the only one? How old do you feel in your head? Let me know in the comments. But anywho, since most of us never really took retirement seriously until we saw the number 50 right around the bend, as my Scottish grandma used to say, bless her soul, the math is working against us. It's not completely impossible math, but not exactly favorable either. We're looking at math that requires a level of savings discipline that collides with everything else happening in a Gen Xer's life at 50. Which is our world? Well, in many ways, it is on fire. We've got kids going to college, aging parents refusing to stop driving, even though they're a public danger on the roads, and some of our marriages are imploding. Then, there's the sudden realization many of us are having that life could be over at any time. So let's join a band and live, damn it. It ain't easy being Gen X in 2026. But I'm still proud of us. We Gen Xers are currently socking away 15.4% of our pay annually, including company matching contributions, which actually tops Fidelity's suggested 15% rate. I mean, the effort is definitely there. The problem is, though, the effort started 20 years too late, and the number that went in during 2024, on average, was just under $7,500. Millennials. These bastards. Which I do hate to compare myself to them, but yeah, they put away over $12,000. I mentioned my dad earlier, with his shaking hands and still hell-bent on driving a delivery truck in his mid-60s. Well, that was a huge wake-up call for me, and it should be for you, because if you're like 24% of Gen Xers, We are currently supporting both aging parents and juggling responsibilities of still helping our children at the same time. Talk about burning the candle at both ends. They call us the sandwich generation. And I do feel intense pressure being the top layer of my sandwich. And it's like the ham and cheese filling in the middle is being squeezed right out of the slices of bread. And people have the nerve to say that Gen X is angry and should take a chill pill? Try being in our shoes for just 1 minute, pal. You wouldn't survive 12 seconds. I mean, am I too young to be turning into the real-life version of Walt Kowalski, the main character of the Clint Eastwood movie, Gran Torino? I'm just asking for a friend, as they say. I've been reading a lot of statistics, and quite frankly, it does make you feel better knowing you're not alone in all this. The 2025 study by insurer Allianz found that 78% of sandwich generation Americans provide their parents with either physical, financial, or emotional support. And I gotta be honest here. Sometimes, I feel like my pops is my second son in terms of having to stay on top of things on his behalf. Sure enough, 70% of those of us caring for both children and parents said it had a significant impact on their retirement plans. No shit, Sherlock. 59% reported they had reduced or stopped contributing to their retirement savings entirely. Because, newsflash, buddy, the average Gen Xer is not pulling in $100,000 a month. On average, those stats show the average Gen Xer caregiver spends about $10,000 per year on caregiving expenses. Well, guess what? That's 10 whole grand a year not going into your retirement account, not compounding, not growing, just gone. Another genius stating the obvious is Jessica Ruggles, corporate vice president of financial wellness at New York Life, who summed it up by saying Gen Xers should be focused on protecting their life's work. But instead, many are contending with a perfect storm: significant debt, insufficient retirement savings, and rising healthcare costs. Speaking of debt, I don't want to go there, but folks, we have to. We Generation X hold $6.69 trillion in total debt as of 2025. That's the most of any generation. Wow, we're really living the dream, aren't we? The average Gen Xer carries $9,600 in credit card debt, and 43% of us say they've been holding credit card balances, with an average north of $10,000. Yep, another $10,000 right here. So what do we do? Nearly 1/4 of Gen Xers who participate in a workplace retirement plan have borrowed from that plan. Not a withdrawal, an actual loan against their own future. And it's not like we do it to go on a cruise. 29% say it's all due to unforeseen family or personal emergencies, or paying down credit card or some other debt at 23%. Another 18% say, hey, the cost of living isn't going any lower, so we got to borrow from our retirement plan to manage the rising living costs. Yep, that's called just trying to survive, buddy. Being us, Generation X, it's freaking expensive right about now. We're simultaneously front-loading the cost of living for 3 generations, and doing so by borrowing from our future selves. Yet another fun fact: we Gen X have lived through 8 freaking recessions. Meanwhile, Gen Z is whining about the lack of work-life balance in the workplace. Yeah, cry me a river, kid. The dot-com crash of 2000 hit when many of us Gen Xers were just making our first serious investment contributions. Then, the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009 landed during what should have been our prime earning years. The housing crash devastated household wealth, good and proper. COVID-19 in 2020 brought market volatility, job losses, and early retirement savings withdrawals. The S&P 500 dropped 34% in the first quarter of 2020 alone. And the inflation spike of 2022, that messed up the purchasing power of whatever we had managed to scrape together and save. Each of these events, individually, was a huge setback. Stacked together across a single working life, they form a pattern that looks less like bad luck and more like a generational obstacle course. One user on Reddit's Gen X forum wrote, "Retirement is gone. Most of us are not going to retire. There is not enough money saved, and cost of living is skyrocketing." The sentiment might be extreme. The feeling behind it is not. But I need to slow down for a second, because if you're watching this and you're in your late 40s or 50s, everything mentioned so far wasn't exactly news. Because this is your life. You deal with it daily. You know the number in your account. You know what your parents need. You know what your kids cost. But this next part, though, that's the one that keeps us up at night. And sadly, it's also the one where the most misinformation lives. According to the 2025 annual report from Social Security's Board of Trustees, the program's trust funds are projected to run short of money in 2034. The oldest Gen Xers will be eligible for early Social Security benefits in 2027. They'll reach full retirement age of 67 starting in 2032. So the trust fund depletion hits just 2 years after the first wave reaches full eligibility. 81% of us Gen Xers are pretty worried our promised benefits won't be paid once we get to retirement age. Yep, just go ahead and pile it on, will you? That's what it feels like anyway. And here's where confusion makes things worse. An AARP survey found that more than 40% of Gen Xers believe Social Security would not be able to pay any benefits if the trust funds ran dry. Another 17% said they weren't sure. Only 31% correctly answered that benefits would continue, but be reduced. I can tell you what I know to be true. As someone who's been in the financial world for years, benefits would not end, but they would be reduced by around 19%. And even in the worst-case scenario, Gen X retirees will still receive Social Security. You're still going to get 80% of your benefit if nothing else changes. But 80% of an already insufficient benefit layered on top of an already insufficient savings balance, it's not exactly the best-case scenario, is it? So the backup plan for a lot of Gen Xers is simple. Just keep working. What's the difference? Some of us have been doing it since we were 13. I still don't get where boomers and the silent generations got the nerve to nickname us the lazy generations. But all we've been doing since the day we were born is work, toil, grind. Jesus. So the way it's looking, 40% of Gen Xers expect to retire after age 70. Or, get this, not at all. 54% plan to work in some capacity during retirement. Nearly half, 48%, say they plan to work in retirement or are already doing so, and 56% of those said it would be out of necessity. I guess nobody is a greeter at Walmart in their early 80s by choice. But the problem with the "I'll just work forever" plan is that you're assuming your body, mind, and job market will be on board with said plan. I don't know about you, but as of a few weeks ago, my right hip has been acting kind of wonky, and I'm not even 50 yet. Not for another year anyway. It assumes your body and the job market will cooperate. I prefer to face reality and not coddle myself with fairy tales, and I think we all do. So here are more real-life facts for you. The Employee Benefit Research Institute found that while workers report an expected median retirement age of 65, retirees report a median actual retirement age of 62. People leave the workforce 3 years earlier than they plan to, on average. Not because they want to, but because their health fails, companies downsize, or positions evaporate into thin air. Among Americans between 50 and 65, 14% were laid off at least once in the past 10 years. Of those who experienced layoffs, 24% were not able to find a new job. This is where the Age Discrimination in Employment Act becomes critical. Nearly half of workers over 40 report earning less than their younger coworkers. About 22% of employees 40 and up say their workplaces skip over older workers for challenging assignments. 16% say they've witnessed a pattern of being passed over for promotions. The Work Forever plan requires an economy that wants older workers. The data suggests the economy has mixed feelings about us. Then there's healthcare, which functions less like a line item and more like a second mortgage that kicks in precisely when your income drops. The proverbial cherry on top of the messy chocolate sundae of our Gen X lives. A person retiring at 65 in 2025 is expected to spend approximately $172,500 on healthcare during retirement. Nearly half of that goes to Medicare Part B and Part D premiums alone. Many retirees also need Medigap supplemental insurance to cover what Medicare doesn't. A Fidelity Benefits report estimates a couple retiring today will need approximately $315,000 for healthcare expenses. That number, for context, is close to the entire projected savings shortfall for the average Gen Xer. Healthcare alone could consume the gap. Long-term care insurance adds another layer of complexity, as Medicare doesn't cover extended nursing home stays. There is one number that complicates the narrative. We Gen X are expected to inherit $30 trillion, the largest share of the $84.4 trillion Great Wealth Transfer. from the silent generation and baby boomers to their heirs. 30 trillion is an astonishing figure, but it's also an average. And yes, as you'd expect, it's being skewed enormously by concentrations of wealth at the top. The Gen Xer whose parents own a paid-off house in a major metro area and a diversified portfolio, those folks are going to be just fine. If you're one of them, I'm happy for you. Really am. Finally, something going our way. But the Gen Xer whose parents rent, carry their own medical debt, and need financial support, well, we are going to inherit a big serving of nothing, with a side dish of possibly inheriting obligations. The great wealth transfer is real. It is also wildly uneven, and for many Gen Xers, it amounts to inheriting a house that needs a new roof in a town where property values have been flat for 15 years. So yeah, let's not make inheritance a retirement plan just yet. The system has started to respond, at least mechanically. The Secure Act 2.0, passed in 2022, now allows workers in their 50s to save an additional $7,500 in their 401k through catch-up contributions. For those aged 60 to 63, the catch-up limit rises to $11,250. In 2026, the base contribution limit goes up to $24,500. And importantly, high earners will be required to make their catch-up contributions to Roth 401k accounts. The Act also pushes back required minimum distributions, or RMDs, from age 72 to 73, giving retirement accounts more time to grow. Delaying Social Security from 62 to 70 can increase benefits by up to 76%. Health savings accounts offer a triple tax advantage, with contribution limits of $4,150 for individuals and $8,300 for families in 2025, plus a $1,000 catch-up for those 55 and older. Many Gen Xers are investing in target date funds within their 401k plans, which automatically adjust risk as retirement approaches. Only 33% of Gen Xers currently work with a financial advisor, 10 percentage points lower than the 43% of boomers who do. The tools exist. The awareness of those tools does not match the urgency, though. I know we Gen Xers hate asking for help, and we are used to figuring it out ourselves. But in this case, I gotta say, it's worth looking into. Jason Fichtner, former chief economist at the Social Security Administration and co-author of a paper titled Retirement Challenges Facing Gen X in the Peak 65 Era, and his co-author, Suzanne Norman, a veteran investment strategist, highlighted something important. And I actually found a copy of that paper, and I'll link it down below in the description box if you want to read it, because it is eye-opening. The solution is not simply saving more. You have to make more money, and it's got to be sustainable, protected income through education, advice, and policy reform. Things like annuities or insurance products that provide guaranteed income streams for life, so you can complement your Social Security and 401k withdrawals. Problem is, we are a pretty skeptical bunch. And can you blame us? But the bottom line still is, only 19% of us Gen Xers currently think it's a good time to invest in the market. And that's down from 30% the previous quarter, and the lowest of any generation. And I hate to break it to you, but fear is not a retirement strategy, but it's the one a lot of us are running right now. Last Thanksgiving, under that kitchen sink, holding a flashlight while my dad's hands shook around a wrench, I thought about time. Not in the big philosophical sense, in the compound interest sense. He started his pension contributions in 1979. I started my retirement savings at 28. He's going to be okay. Tight, but okay. The 64.5 million people of us, members of the blessed forgotten generation, we're the ones who got the wrench but not the flashlight. The ones who were told to figure it out themselves during the largest shift in retirement policy in American history. The ones paying for our kids' tuition and our parents' prescriptions with the same dang paycheck. And, well, if you are like me, you also opened your accounts on your phones this year too. And most of us see a number that feels exactly like stepping on that scale after the holidays. It's not bad, but it's also not great. And the trajectory is the thing. And the trajectory does not care what generation you belong to.